Hello, this is Don again, and I'm going to see what I can do here to put together the information that you need to go along with the worksheets that I've made and the exercises. So this is part 2 of our Sound Relationship House series, Enhancing Your Marriages. And last week I talked about the Sound Relationship House, and we went into detail on levels 1, building love maps, 2, fondness and admiration, and 3, turning towards. And so I'm going to proceed with principle number 4, which is not one of the levels in the Sound Relationship House, but principle 4 is speak your partner's love language. Now I'm going to give you a handout on the 5 love languages, and the one thing that even if you're familiar with love languages, and I'm just going to give a quick review here, even if you're familiar with them, the important thing to realize is that you need to speak your partner's love language. So it's not about knowing your own love language any other than just to be able to communicate your love language to your partner so that your partner knows how to speak to you. So you need to be familiar with your partner's love language and learn how to speak their language. It's like if you speak French and I want to communicate to you, I need to learn French and speak French. So if I find out that your love language is acts of service, then I need to pay attention to that and do acts of service to communicate to you that I love you. So let's just quickly go through those 5 love languages. Words of affirmation. These are like words of fondness and admiration. Quality time. Now this is face-to-face or shoulder-to-shoulder quality time. Let me explain something here. Men are really, they more kind of operate this way, shoulder-to-shoulder communication. You know, 2 guys maybe fishing on the bank of a river, shoulder-to-shoulder communication. But women are more this kind of face-to-face. So it's important that in your relationship you do some of this and some of this, and not just however you prefer it, right? Speak your partner's love language. And if your partner's female, get in there and do some quality time. This isn't watching movies. That's not quality time. This is face-to-face, across the table from each other, drinking coffee or something. And if you're a female, do some shoulder-to-shoulder communication if your partner's love language is quality time. But nevertheless, it's not watching movies, it's talking, okay? Receiving gifts. So if your love language really is receiving gifts, it's not the size or the expense of the gift that counts at all. It could be a homemade gift, it could be plucking a wild flower. If their love language is receiving gifts, it's not about the price. So gifts are important. Small gifts, any kind of gifts. Acts of service, well, that's self-explanatory. For myself, my primary love language is acts of service. And I couldn't figure out why. I would clean the house and I would organize things and do the dishes, and my wife would go, well, you don't really care about me, do you? And I'm going, what are you talking about? Until I understood love languages, and I realized that her love language was words of affirmation and quality time. When I'm cleaning the house, it's not quality time with her, so I have to speak her love language. In many ways, she could care less about the house being clean because that's just the way she is. Physical touch, again, men will often say physical touch is definitely my love language. But if physical touch is your love language, then it's not about sex, it's about just simple things like a hand on a shoulder, holding hands, or those kinds of things. So speak your partner's love language. The handout that I've given you is a little bit more detailed than what I just said. And at the top, there is a website. It's 5lovelanguages.com. If you don't know your love language, go there, take the test, find out your love language, then communicate your love language to your partner. And remember, your love language is probably the top 2 of the 5. The top 2 would probably be considered your love languages. Okay? Now, let's take a look at principle number 5. And I've given you a set of notes here that give you kind of the main things I want you to remember. And with principle number 5, learn how to have a stress-reducing conversation. A stress-reducing conversation is simply a conversation that doesn't produce stress. It reduces it. That's pretty simple, but it's not, because so many times we get into a conversation, somebody says something, the other person gets triggered, and then now you're into an argument, and it's not stress reducing by any stretch of the imagination. So let's start with something simple, and this has to do with really level 1 and level 2 and level 3 of the Sound Relationship House. Only a third of American families these days sit down at dinner time and eat together. A third, that's it. And then they say that 1/2 of that third have the television on, which means they're not talking to each other, they're watching TV and eating. That's 16% that are actually talking together. And it seems to me like the dinner table is one time in the day where we can talk together, because, you know, we have busy lives. And to get the family together, put them in a circle and say, let's talk, is probably not going to work. But if you're on the dinner table, think about it's just something you can do besides eat. I say ritualize this. That's what Gottman likes to promote, rituals. So I'm going to say ritualize stress-reducing conversations. If you need to talk about some things as a couple that your children can't be a part of, then save it for after dinner. But during the dinner time, even your children can learn how to do this. Even your children can talk about the problems they're having at school or the problems they're having with math. And the same rules are going to apply with children as they apply with adults who have stress-reducing conversations. Stress-reducing conversations can save you money going to the therapist. You get it? When I see people, oftentimes especially the first session, while I'm just gathering information, they're talking, they're telling me all about their problems. I'm taking notes, I'm reflecting back. And even that kind of a session, they go home feeling helped. And we hadn't even gotten to the therapy yet. And that's what we find, that people just need to be able to talk to someone who's not going to judge them, who's not going to criticize them, who's going to totally accept them and empathize with them. And that's what couples should be able to do in these stress-reducing conversations. The result of helping a partner manage stress from outside of the relationship will be a great asset in making a better marriage and maintaining a better marriage and keeping it in the positive perspective. Remember, on the Sound Relationship House, level 4 is a positive perspective. So we want to keep the relationship in the positive perspective. So let me give you the rules for having a stress-reducing conversation. Once again, I'm going to send you notes on this, but let's go through them. Rule 1. Only talk about the stresses that are outside of your relationship. So you've got to be careful as to what you talk about. Now, if talking about the in-laws is going to trigger your partner, that is not a stress-reducing conversation. So you got to stay away from that as well. Be careful. Maybe just talk about your own family, the stresses you're having with your own family. That's usually easier to take from your partner to hear that. But don't talk about your partner, the things that are bugging you about your partner, or about your partner's family. Even if they say it's okay, it's probably not the best thing to reduce stress in your partner. So only talk about things outside of your relationship or outside of your partner's family. And rule number 2, listen actively. They call it active listening. And that's one thing that all couples need to get better at, is active listening. It's what we will talk about again when we talk about managing conflict and how to have a stressful conversation. Managing conflict is a stressful conversation. For today, we're talking about non-stressful conversations. So, active listening, what does that mean? It means looking at the person, not watching the TV while they're talking over here. It means not talking back, like with sentences, but we call them non-verbals. And non-verbals can be, first of all, facial expressions. It could be looking at the person with your eyes. It could be some verbal sounds like, whoa, wow, ouch, ooh, like those kind of empathetic sort of sounds, depending on what they're saying. It's the non-verbals. It's giving them your attention. But it also goes one step further. After the person has talked about everything, try repeating it back to them. Try repeating back to them in your own words what they said. Don't make it too far off in your own words, like you're interpreting it into something, but try to give it back to them as close to the way it was said. Like, oh, so you're telling me that you're really feeling overwhelmed and you would really appreciate it if I give you help in these areas and list the areas. They will feel understood and validated, okay? Now that kind of thing probably comes up more in a conflict resolution type of conversation, but for now it's like, oh, so you're telling me that your boss is really hard on you and doesn't really understand you? Man, that must feel awful. Validate their emotions, okay? Validate their emotions. Rule 3, don't side with the enemy. Support your partner by empathizing, by taking your partner's side. Even if you have something to say that may be valid, it's not going to be a stress-reducing conversation. Take your partner's side. Don't go with the side of the enemy. Rule number 4, show some affection. Even if that means some physical touch, like a hand on the knee, or let me hold you and hug you after they finish. Give them some physical affection. Rule number 5. Now, here's a big one for the men. No problem solving. Men, don't try to fix it. And women, if you're fixer-uppers too, no fixing, no problems solving. Women, your husband's a big boy. Let him solve their own problems. Men, your wife is a big girl. Let her solve her own problems. She doesn't want to be fixed. She wants to be listened to and understood, and that's end of story. Now, if one of you has this burning desire to share a solution to the problem, simply say, would you mind if I give you what I think could help, or tell you what I think would be a good solution? And if they say, okay, green light, share it. But honestly, if they say, no thank you, I can handle it myself, clam up, that's enough, end of story. And women, don't take your problems, your husband's problems, onto yourself. Women have these brains that are like one big room and everything is there in this one room, and they will take their kids' problems on, they'll take their husband's problems on, they'll take their neighbor's problems on. Don't do that. Don't allow yourself. Your husband's a big boy. Just turn him loose. Let him solve his own problems. Don't add to your plate your partner's problems. So, what I'm going to do is read 2 scenarios. First of all, the wrong way to have a stress-reducing conversation. Husband, I had another terrible meeting with Ethel today, in which she challenged my knowledge, and she has been going to the boss and telling him that she doubts that I'm competent. I hate her. Wife, I think this is another example of you flying off the handle and overreacting. I have seen her to be very constructive and reasonable. Maybe you're the one that's just being too sensitive to her concerns. Husband. That woman is out to get me. Wife. This is the paranoid streak that keeps coming out of you. I've told you to try to control that. Husband. Oh, forget it. Obviously, not a stress-reducing conversation. She was taking the side of the enemy. She wasn't empathizing with her husband. Here's the right way. Husband. I had another terrible meeting with Ethel today in which she challenged my knowledge, and she's been going to the boss telling him that she doubts that I'm competent. I hate her. Wife. I can't believe that woman. She's a terrible gossip. What did you say? Husband. I told her she's just out to get me and that she's not going to succeed. I think it would be better if I ignored her and just forget it. Wife. Well, your boss knows what she's like. Everyone does. Husband. That's true. He doesn't share her opinions of me either. Okay? Notice not siding with the enemy and empathizing, understanding your partner. Of course, there's 100 ways to do that as long as you follow those rules. So if you look at the handout on stress-reducing conversation, turning toward versus turning away in your everyday life, stress-reducing conversation, you'll find a summary for how to do that, the rules, and how this all works. Now I want to draw your attention to the page called The Magic 5 Hours a Week. And this is kind of a summary of everything we've done up to this point. Remember, if the first 3 levels of the sound relationship house are working well, level 4 will be positive. You can't work on level 4 by itself. You can't directly attack or work on level 4. You work on level 4 by working on levels 1, 2, and 3. And so 5 magic hours a week is kind of like a summary of the major parts of the first 3 levels. All right? Basically what we're saying is this. In a week, if you spend 5 hours in a week nurturing your relationship, it will be magic, like magic on your relationship. So let's review. Remember we talked about partings and reunions? So before you go for the day, take some time. Take some time to ask your partner, what's going on today? Doing anything special today? And they do the math here. 2 minutes a day times 5 days when they're going to work, that's 10 minutes a week. Reunions, when you come back, you can spend a little more time. Like, how was your day? This is kind of stress-reducing conversation material. How was your day? What happened today? Listen to your partner. Empathize with your partner. Actively listen. 20 minutes a day times 5 days, 140 minutes right there. Showing admiration and appreciation. So genuinely take the time to talk to your spouse. Tell them the things that are going well. Tell them what you appreciate about them and give examples. Remember that exercise, I appreciate exercise? Give examples of how they're showing this trait of character that you appreciate. Affection. Remember, when you part, when you return, give that kiss, hold, grab, touch each other, play with each other. It's good. It's good. Take the time to do things together every day. And then your date night and updating your love life, a 2-hour date night, put that all together and you get about 5 hours a week. And what did we say about that last time? We said, if you put 5 hours of work directly on your relationship in a week, that's like spending 5 hours at the gym on your physical body, your immune system, your cardiovascular system, your digestive system. Stress is hard on the body. Relationships that are stressful are hard on the physical body. 5 magical hours a week. Now, let's talk about this negative and positive perspective once again. You know when you're in a negative perspective, when you can't solve conflicts or manage conflict, when you can't build dreams together, when you the upper three levels of the sound relationship house just can't work. It's a feeling like you have this chip on your shoulder, and you have this feeling like there's always a feeling that something's gonna go bad. You kind of like feel like you're walking on eggshells. You know you're in a negative perspective when it's like that. And it's like this: when your partner makes an observation or gives a suggestion, you feel you're being criticized and picked on and evaluated. In a positive relationship, a partner can share something with you, so give you some negative feedback. Honey, you got ketchup on your face, and you'll appreciate it. Okay? So negative feedback is valuable information. Don't think of it as your enemy. But if you're in a negative perspective, of course, negative feedback is going to be something quite discouraging. It's going to bring you down because you're in this negative feedback mode. I'm going to say it again, if the first three levels of the sound relationship house are working well, you'll automatically be in the positive and you'll have better things going on. Now, I want to give you a little bit of information on the ABC model, and this will help you understand some things about how to communicate better. Next, I'd like to give you a little bit of an introduction to what I call Psychology 101. If you've been to college, you know that 101 classes are the level entry classes. So this is just basic, simple psychology. So what I have here is A and C. Okay? A and C. Now, what A stands for is what happens to you. So something happens to you. Somebody says something. Somebody does something. C is your response, and it comes in two parts. First of all, you'll have an initial emotion or how you feel something like anger or sadness or something, and then behaviors. You'll do something. You'll react in some way. You might shut down. You might swear at them. You might run away. You might cry. You might whatever. Your behavior, whatever you want, okay? So for instance, let's say that A is somebody says to you, "You're such a loser." Now, what would your response be? If I were to ask every single one of you, how would you feel and what would you do? And every single one of you would give me a slightly and sometimes a very different answer to that question. And what that's telling me is this: A does not cause C. It's not like gravity, where if I drop a pen, it always does the same thing. It falls to the ground. We would say gravity calls the pen to fall to the ground because it always falls to the ground. But when someone calls somebody a loser, the responses vary. So we can't say A causes C. You can't say, "But she made me so angry." Nope. It doesn't work that way. What do you think causes C? Not A, but you guessed it, B. Something else causes C. B causes C. What does B stand for? Beliefs or thoughts. But I like beliefs because it starts with the letter B. But it could be thoughts. It could be thoughts about A or beliefs about what A is. Beliefs of what A is what's happening with A. But it's also your beliefs about yourself in that moment. For instance, if you have had a tendency to believe that you're a loser, if someone were to call you a loser, that would trigger something within you and you would be more reactive because of that self-belief. I'm a loser. So what we're saying here is this. A, what your partner says doesn't cause you to feel a certain way or act a certain way. It's your interpretation of what was said and your belief about yourself in that moment. So how can we use this information to help us in our relationships? Let me explain. Let's say that this is A and this is C. So A, something happens, and C, you respond. When they're this close together, it's like a reflex action, A, C. And you just automatically have a reflex action like you touched a hot stove, okay? But if you know this information that there's something else acting here called B, it helps you put a space between A and C. B in the middle there is your belief about A. Now, where did this come from? It actually came from a Greek philosopher by the name of Epictetus, and this is how he said it. He said, it's not what happens to you that determines your response, but your interpretation of what's happening to you that determines your response. So let's say somebody says something, and let's say they're saying something that's actually rude. Now, sometimes you know that our partners say things and they don't mean anything about it. They don't mean to be mean. They're not even thinking that's even a bad thing to say. They just innocently say something, and somehow it triggers you deep within, and you interpret it like, you're so mean. That was a mean thing to say. Okay? So let me give an example. This one time my wife and I were traveling, and we happened to be stuck in traffic in Seattle at rush hour. And we're trying to make it to southern Oregon, you know, in enough time to at the end of the day. And so there we are in traffic, and all of a sudden my wife has to go to the bathroom. And, you know, just getting off the freeway and then thinking about getting back on the freeway. My mind is just twirling like this. But we made it. We got off the freeway and she went to the bathroom. She comes back and she says, quit looking at me that way. And I says, what way? You look like you're disgusted with me. And I just went, right like that. And I just went, what? I'm not disgusted at you. Yeah, you look like you're just disgusted with me, and you have every reason to believe me because we were stuck in traffic and yada, 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 yada. And then we started the conversation, and I said, no, I'm not disgusted with you. I'm not. Yes, you are. No, I'm not. Disgusted is like eating dog poop. And she went, what? I said, that's what disgusting means to me. She says, well, then what would you describe it? I'd say, well, disappointed. Oh, I'm not disgusted. And to her, disgusted means disappointed. So do you see what I'm saying? A person says something. She didn't mean to say something to hurt me by saying, you look disgusted. She thought she was just saying something very simple. You look like you're disappointed, which was true. See? So we have to be careful here. But sometimes, let's pretend that A is something actually rude, actually mean. Like someone saying to you, you're such a loser, okay? Now, you're C, and you hear these words coming at you. If you feel something within you, remember feelings are the first response, you feel something. If you feel something like anger or something in you that's an uncomfortable emotion, obviously you're not going to feel really comfortable by that word, you're such a loser, but if you feel this uncomfortable feeling within you, recognize that's B. That's your baggage. B for baggage. That's your baggage that's coming from your past. And see, how you interpret this is how you understand it from your past. And so in that moment, just go, that's my past that's coming up here. That's my baggage. I give myself love and compassion. Now, the next thing is to recognize that A said something rude. But now, let's interpret it not as that's personal here, let's interpret it as A has a problem. See, A is rude. That's A's problem. A is hurt somewhere. He's been hurt or she's been hurt. So that's A's stuff. And just send what they said back to them with love and compassion. So don't say this out loud, obviously. Just say it inside yourself. Think it. I'm feeling hurt. I'm feeling angry. I'm feeling sad. I'm feeling really, really bad right now. That's my stuff. I give myself love and compassion. And what A just said wasn't right. It was rude. That's his or her stuff. I send it back to them with love and compassion. And by just going through that thought process, you now disengage yourself from what A did. And you're not going to let A take control over you. You're not going to be that victim and let A make you do something, because A can't. You become a victim by your own past and you react in wrong ways. If you can take a step back and do that, this is my stuff. I give myself love and compassion. What A just said is rude. That's her stuff, his stuff. I send it back to them with love and compassion. Then you can probably be more assertive, like, that's interesting. Why would you say that I'm a loser? You see, now you can be assertive instead of like, what? Or just shut down and cry and become passive. Okay? So that is how the ABC model can work. And this is why it works in our minds. This is how our minds work. Our brains work this way. We have these past memories, these past experiences, and they get touched. The buttons can get pushed. We call them buttons. These are our triggers. We call them triggers. These are real. You've all experienced it. We all have. These are from our stuff, our baggage, our past, and we can't allow that to hijack this situation. But we do all the time. I've done it. We've all done it. This takes practice to do this ABC model. I give myself love and compassion. I send that back to A, that rudeness, with love and compassion. Okay, I have done this experiment with my groups. I will say, okay, listen to this. You are a loser. Okay, you. How do you feel? What would you do? How do you feel? What would you do? How do you feel? What would you do? And again, I get mostly negative answers, like I feel angry, I'd yell, I'd swear at him, I'd punch him, or I get very passive answers, like I would just walk away, I would run away, which is really a passive expression of anger. But I will say now this, listen to your body. Just pay attention to your body. When I say, you're a loser, does it feel comfortable or uncomfortable? And they go, I feel it. I feel it here. I feel it here. I feel it here. It's uncomfortable. Now listen to your body. You're an apple. And then you get a lot of giggles, like, oh, well, that's funny. Now, here's what I discovered one time when I did this. I went, you're an apple. And everybody went, oh, that's silly. And they had no uncomfortable feelings here. But one person did, and that person was a First Nations person. And he says, that made me feel uncomfortable. And I said, can you tell us why? And he said, because in our culture, First Nations culture, that's what they call someone who's red on the outside but white on the inside. It's kind of like they're putting you down for disowning your own culture and your own traditions. You're an apple is a bad thing to say. So I had to switch it to something else. You're a pineapple. And I've only had one person, one place give me a negative reaction. They said because they work in a factory in California where they called newbies pineapples. So, but it was not cultural and it was just one person. I stick with pineapple now when I use this illustration. Do you see the power on ourselves from our past? If I have a past and I feel like a loser, I will react versus I've never felt like a pineapple. So there's no energy there. It's just weird. Like, why would you call me a pineapple? That's weird. You see, totally different feeling, totally different reaction. That's how it works. Okay? Okay. Where are we going to go with this next? Let me illustrate. We all have this emotion of anger. Anger is just an emotion. It's an appropriate emotion when there is injustice. In the Bible, God gets angry. There's like 40-some verses of God getting angry. Why wouldn't God get angry if anger is an appropriate emotion when there's an injustice? I mean, he sees more injustice in this world than any of us see. It's just an emotion. The problem isn't the emotion of anger, like some people feel it is. Some people literally feel they don't want to feel angry, they don't want to be angry. That's not healthy. The problem is how we express our anger. That's the problem. It's just like Paul says in the book, I forget where it is in the Bible, but he says, be angry, but sin not. That's King James Version. But it's okay to be angry, but just be careful how you express your anger. That's what he's saying. So we find that there are basically 4 types, categories of ways of expressing anger. Fight, all right? Put up your dukes, fireworks, yelling words, raising your voice. Flight, running away, escaping, or freeze, shutting down, becoming paralyzed, just going comatose, dissociative. Fight, flight, or freeze. There is a 4th one, and it's the appropriate way to express anger. It's called assertiveness, being assertive. Now, I'm not going to go into too much detail on being assertive this time around. We'll talk about it more on another occasion. But for now, assertiveness is an appropriate way to express anger. Here's the deal. If you have an aggressive or fight response, you only respect yourself. If you have a very passive response, where you run away or shut down, you only respect the other person. Now, a passive aggressive, you've heard that before, a passive aggressive is kind of like a combination of aggression and passiveness, and though they come in many forms like sarcasm or joking to hurt somebody, or there's just so many ways to be passive expressive. But nevertheless, a person who's passive aggressive is not really respecting themselves or others. They might be more respecting themselves, but really definitely not respecting the other person. An assertive person respects the other person and themselves equally. Okay? Like for instance, if someone says, Don, you're a loser, I can respect the other person by speaking in a everyday, as we used to say to our kids, inside voice, without any tone of anger, but with the tone of respect. And I can reply assertively like, excuse me, but I really don't appreciate it when you speak to me like that. And when I am passive, what I do is I don't speak my truth. I don't speak my truth. I just shut down or walk away. When I'm aggressive, I raise my voice and I yell. And I speak my truth, but I don't do it in a respectful way. So do you see that an assertive person has this self-respect? They're not going to lay down and be a doormat, and they're also going to respect the other person by not putting them down or yelling at them or being hurtful to them in any way, shape, or form. So I have sent you or given you a couple of pages. One is called the Anger Inventory. And this is a way to find out what your style of anger is. Now, nobody has one style, but some of us have more of this and less of that and a little bit of that. We're all going to be different. It's like fingerprints. But if you want to know what your style of anger is or your partner's style of anger is, simply do this. Take the sheet called Anger Inventory and put a check mark beside every single line that describes you at one time or another. You may not do it all the time, but if you do it occasionally, that's what you do sometimes, you check it. Leave it blank if you never ever have that as part of your MO, okay? When you're done that sheet, you take the second sheet And on the second sheet, you use the first sheet and you basically do this. Every number that you checked, you find that number on the second sheet and you put a circle around the number. So if you check the number 3, find the number 3 on the second page and put a circle around that number 3. You'll notice the second page is divided into 5 paragraphs and there's a list of numbers under each of the 5 paragraphs. You simply circle all the numbers you check on page 2. Then you go to on page 2, you go to the first paragraph and first paragraph says A, numbers 1, 6, 11, 16, 21, and 26. If you count all the circles in that line and you put how many circles, like 2 circles, 0 circles, you put that number down below at the bottom, just above the letter A, appropriate. And then you count how many circles in B, paragraph B. How many circles? You put that number just above the letter B at the bottom of the page. And you'll get, if it's no circles, put a 0, 1 circle, 1, 2 circles. The highest number is 6. You cannot have more than 6 circles because that's all the numbers there are. And then you look at your continuum of anger styles and you'll see, are you passive? Are you aggressive? Are you passive aggressive? So it works kind of like this. If you look at the continuum right here, look at the continuum, over here is very, very passive, hidden and repressed or suppressed. On the other side is very aggressive, rage, uncontrolled expressions of anger. As you move across the continuum, you go from passive, more passive, less passive, more aggressive, less passive, more aggressive. Okay? Right in the middle is assertiveness or appropriate expressions of anger. So if you're on the far extremes, those are the most unhealthy expressions of anger. Those far extremes do the most damage. As far as C, hidden repressed anger goes, it hurts you more than anything. You hold all that anger in, you repress it, you suppress it, you keep it in, you don't express it in any way, shape, or form. And what you're doing is you're holding your anger in, and it's going to kill you. It's going to cause disease. There's so many diseases that are caused by holding in your anger. But guess what? If you're on the other extreme, B, and you're throwing your anger at people like in rage in an uncontrolled way, you're damaging your relationships. First and foremost, you're damaging your relationships. Now get this. A C, hidden repressed, you're hurting yourself, but when you're depressed, and that's what causes depression, this hidden repressed anger, when you're depressed, when you are in this form, you actually are harming the relationship because you kind of put an invisible wall up between you and your partner. And so you hurt, but so does your relationship. When you're on the B, the rage and uncontrolled anger, you're first and foremost, you're damaging your relationship. But when your relationship suffers, guess what? You suffer as well. Okay? So as we move closer and closer to the middle, it gets less passive and less aggressive. In the middle is appropriate expression of anger. If you have a 6 here and zeros above everything else, then congratulations, you must be God, because you're a perfect person. Just kidding. What I'm saying is, don't beat yourself up for having a spread of numbers here, because we're just human. And none of us is perfect. We don't always express our anger appropriately. Okay? Now, passive aggressive would be D and E. D and E are passive aggressive, kind of a mixture. Excuse me, but D would be more of an aggressive type. No, D would be more of a passive type of passive aggressive, like gossiping. And E would be more like an aggressive type of passive aggressive, like secretly letting the air out of somebody's tires at night. See, it's done anonymously. Okay, just to finish this up, let's just simply say this. In a perfect world, 99% of our communication should be assertive. What that says is that there's room to be passive. Be passive when you're in physical danger. If someone has a gun to your head and says, hand me your wallet, it's not a time for conversation, hand them your wallet. Sometimes it's important to be aggressive. For instance, if the building's on fire and there are people just sitting around not taking this thing seriously, you might have to raise your voice and tell them there's a fire in the building. Get out of here. Okay? But for the most part, assertive is the way to go. But we're human. We make mistakes. Here's what they've discovered. They used to say that if you want to get rid of your anger, then take a stick and go out in the woods and beat a tree or beat a punching bag and yell and scream and stuff. What we now know is that when you do that, you feel good in the moment, but in the long run, it actually increases your anger. So they've discovered that because it doesn't matter whether you're passive or you're aggressive, you still get high blood pressure, high heart rate, muscle tension. But when you're assertive, muscle tension goes down, blood pressure goes down, heart rate goes down. It has long-range healthful benefits to be assertive in your communication. So, what can we learn from all this? Here's what we know. Gottman discovered, remember I told you this last week, he discovered that if a couple is fighting, if even one of the couple has a heart rate above 95 beats a minute, assuming your regular heart rate isn't there, above 95 beats a minute, you are what we call in diffuse physiological arousal. In simple English, we say you are flooded. When you are flooded, you do not see everything, you do not hear everything, and you cannot be logical or rational in your conversation. Which simply means, as long as one or both of you are flooded while you're fighting, that means raised voices, yelling, all of that stuff, you are not going to have a productive conversation. It's going to make things even worse. You're going to say things you don't mean. You're not going to be listening actively. It's just not going to work. You just cannot have a conversation that's going to work or be productive or solve conflict when one or both of you are flooded. Won't work. They have done studies on this. One study that comes to mind is they put these people and they got them all flooded, all angry, and everybody's agitated, and then they put them before a TV screen and they played on the TV screen a basketball game, and someone dressed in a witch's costume, carrying a witch's broom, walks through the middle of the basketball game that's on the TV screen, walks right through the middle of the court while they're playing basketball. And 70+% of the people did not see the witch. They did not see the witch. It's amazing. If you want to do something about this, or just experiment with this is not flooded, but this is another one that's very similar. Go on YouTube, and YouTube, I think it's called Monkey Business, just Monkey Business. And you'll see some people, and they're bouncing basketballs and they're passing them to each other, and you're supposed to count how many times the people with white shirts are passing the ball to people with white shirts. Just go and look at it, and you'll see what I mean. It's possible to not see some things, okay? It's kind of like when you look through a cardboard tube. You don't see everything out here. You only see what you see. That's kind of what arguing when you're flooded is like. So what are you going to do about it? You cannot continue to discuss, argue, fight, whatever you want to call it, when one or both of you are flooded. So this is what you do. Whoever sees it first, either you see it in your partner or you see it in yourself, immediately stop. Just stop talking and do this. And just wait. Now, they're not going to see it. Their partner's not going to see this probably. They're not going to see it for a while. and it'll take a while. But if you agree on this, you and your partner agree to do this, you have to remember what it means, what this means. Yeah, it means time out, of course. That's the first thing you got. It's time out. We got to take some time out. But here's what it means. It means I love you. That's the first thing it means. Second thing it means is I really do want to talk about this. I want to have this conversation. But the third thing it means is, but one of us, or we, I prefer, we're flooded. If one's flooded, we're flooded. We're flooded. We need some time out. So then absolutely take some time out, go into separate rooms and do some meditation or whatever it takes that you can do to get your pulse rate down to normal, below 95, before coming together. Generally, they say 20 to 30 minutes, depending on the couple, depending on the person. Then come together. When you come together, at that time, not before, but at that time, decide whether you're going to continue the conversation now or postpone it, because now may be the wrong place, it may be the wrong time, it may be too late at night, whatever the reasons, but make sure you don't just indefinitely postpone it indefinitely. Make sure you come up with a time and a place and you come back to it later. But when you come back to it, use some assertiveness skills. Some of the skills we're going to learn in a future week. Okay? That's pretty much everything I wanted to share with you today. Just I've given you a handout to kind of help you with how to calm yourself down when you're in a flooded state. There's an exercise there. There are other exercises you can find on YouTube, how to calm your body down. But anyway, until I see you again, have a good week.